That was Mexican Radio by Wall of Voodoo, which was on the soundtrack to the classic movie Surf 2, a movie that featured my guest on Revenge of the 80s radio, actor Eddie Deezen. Fans of 80s cinema, such as Midnight Madness, Surf 2, The Whoopie Boys, Delta Pi, and Million Dollar Mystery will know Deezen quite well. Eddie, thanks for coming on with me.
I'm surprised after you name those credits, you still want to talk to me.
Are you kidding? Those are some of my favorite movies of all time.
They're esoteric. I'll put it that way. You know, Surf 2, the whole film is up on YouTube, you know.
Yeah, there's a whole website dedicated to Surf 2 as well.
Oh, okay, good. I got to check that out.
Well, let's go back to the beginning, Eddie. What made you want to get into show business?
Well, let's see. I couldn't really do anything else. I was born in Cumberland, Maryland. To be honest, my dad and I didn't get along, and I wanted to get away from Dad, so I had to get out of home. And there was nothing really I could do. I was always a class clown, always a goof-off, so I got into it, and I lucked out. It took about 2 years, and then things started rolling pretty good.
Now, you started out as a stand-up comedian, right?
Yes, the Comedy Store. And I did do you remember the old Gong Show with Chuck Barris?
Oh, yeah, the Gong Show. I loved that.
I did the Gong Show. I got gonged by Paul Williams.
Ah.
Now, interestingly, I met Paul 20 years later at an audition. He apologized to me. He's in Alcoholics Anonymous. I said, you know, Mr. Williams, you gonged me while I was on the Gong Show. He goes, well, I hope you'll forgive me. He goes, in Alcoholics Anonymous, we have to make amends to anybody we hurt. And I go, oh, don't be silly, you know. But he was a very nice guy, very gracious. But he apologized to me 20 years later for gonging me. It's kind of like it came full circle.
Oh, it's best to be gonged on the Gong Show anyway. People forget you if you win.
Yeah, you're right.
What made you make the switch from stand-up comedy to acting?
Well, I didn't really like stand-up. A lot of my friends are stand-ups, and they like it, but I didn't really have the stomach for it. And also, I was bad at memorizing lines. I use cue cards pretty much, and it kind of hurt me in movies and acting because like when I did Polar Express, the Mecca let me use cue cards all the way through because I can't remember lines. But most directors won't do that, so it kind of hurt me. But when I did stand-up, it was hard. I'd have these little index cards, but some guys can just go up and memorize the whole routine, you know. But I could never do that, so that hurt me.
It's amazing you could do that and talk as fast as you did in Polar Express.
Oh yeah, thanks.
Now, you first landed the role of Eugene Filnick in Grease. He's probably as memorable a character as some of the stars. Tell us about how you got into the mega blockbuster movie, especially as your first one. Yeah,
it was my very first film. There was like a big, huge cattle call. I went in. There were all the guys were just like Fonzie, and all the girls were just like Sandra Dee, Marilyn Monroe, you know, in the 50s. And I was like the only nerd. This was before nerds were, you know, really big. There had been, the first nerd, I think, was the guy in American Graffiti, Charles Martin Smith. He like started the nerd character, and then nobody ever really did it after him. So I came in like a nerd. I was like in a Pee Wee Herman white suit. I went in. I got on good with the casting director. Got on good with the director. There was like 4 of us in the room. Alan Carr, the producer, was there, and I noticed they were like elbowing each other and laughing. So that was good. And then they went, and then they said I wasn't going to be in the film. I got a call. The first they gave me the role. Then I got a call later from my agency. They said they cut the role Eugene out. Then, believe it or not, as corny as this sounds, my agent and I went to church and prayed. We lit candles and prayed, and then I got another call back. It said they're putting Eugene back in. So I got put back in Grease, so I lucked out.
You got to have Eugene in. If you had, as you said, Toad in American Graffiti, you need Eugene for Grease.
Yeah, exactly. It's actually a very small role, you know, but it's because, you know, the scope of Grease was so big, it's the role I get mostly remembered by. But if you look at Grease, I have 2 lines, you know, and you'll see me bopping around all through it, but I don't really do that much. I get hit in the face with a pie, you know.
Well, I noticed the second Grease movie capitalized more on your talents and cult fame, as you had some great scene-stealing lines there, especially in the beginning where you talk to Michael Carrington and say, "How long have you been in America?"
Oh, yes, right. You got a good eye, yeah.
Up next was Laser Blast and I Want to Hold Your Hand, the latter of which, of course, the famous Beatlemania spoof. Laser Blast was your first death scene.
Right, it's the first movie I actually died in. I get shot with a laser beam gun. It's the only movie I literally die in. Yeah, and also Laser Blast was my first release. Grease was the first film I did, but Laser Blast I think actually came out first. It came in like March of '77, so that was the first film I was ever released in.
Well, after some of the small parts, you had a larger one in the movie Midnight Madness. It was Wesley, the captain of the white team.
Yes, exactly.
Grease was filled with already established stars. Midnight Madness boasted some future startups, including yourself,
Michael
Pee Wee
J.
Herman.
Fox's first film.
Yep.
Pee Wee Herman's first film.
Director Andy Tennant was pretty big in this one.
Andy was in Grease with me, believe it. Andy is the only person I've done 4 films with. He was in Grease, Grease 2, Midnight Madness. We did one other film together, but I've done 4 with Andy.
Well, it looked like a lot of fun to work on. How was your experience?
It was good. You know what's interesting? We had Diablo Cody, you know, the lady that wrote Juno. She was there, and she had a film festival here at the New Beverly Cinema. And Midnight Madness is one of her all-time favorite films, so we went there. We had a screening of it. I got to meet Diablo Cody. She's a super nice lady. So it was fun seeing. I haven't seen it in like 30 years, you know.
It's one of my all-time favorites as well.
Oh, thank you.
How did this role and that of Eugene in Grease help boost your career?
Well, I was rolling then. I started the character, and I started doing a lot of B movies, and that was the era, the early '80s, the late '70s. I was working like crazy, literally turning down films because I was getting so much work. Now, I wish it was that way now, but it's not anymore. But that was a happy time in my career. I was just like bouncing around film to film. I was supposed to do Meatballs. I was supposed to be Spaz and Meatballs, but I was too busy doing films at the time. I couldn't do it.
Interesting. Spaz was actually something different from many of your other characters. I want to get into that at a later time. Eddie, you're given credit for, and we mentioned this before, creating the archetype nerd parts that became popular in the 80s movies. Now,
yeah, I think so.
Well, on the surface, that statement is true. Your characters were also very different in many ways. Allow me to list some of them here. Eugene evolved into more of a smart alecky character in Grease 2, not so similar to the one you did in the first Grease movie. Wesley was very aggressive and confrontational. Menlo Schwartzer was a character driven into a life of evil.
Yeah, he was a bad guy. He was actually a bad guy.
Now, that's a few of the varied characters you play. I'm saying that while some might typecast you as an actor, you actually take that particular two-dimensional type and bring it to another level. Talk about your approach to playing these characters those ways.
Well, you're very kind to say that, thanks, because I'm known as real one-dimensional. I kind of think of myself that way, but you're very nice to say that.
Now, despite the portrayal of the stereotype nerd in most of those movies, there was a certain strength to your characters as well, and not really wimpy or cowering, like Spaz from Meatballs in a way, but more tough and scrappy.
Right. I always loved Daffy Duck, and if you look at my character, there's a lot of Daffy Duck in him. He's kind of aggressive, insecure really, but his social veneer is he's very aggressive, But I think all nerds, there's like a hidden tragedy there, They're like tragic figures in history. There's always a sadness, they can never really get the women and all. But, my nerds kind of had more of a bravado, yeah. Spaz was kind of like, picked on type. My characters usually aren't that way.
Yeah, I don't think Wesley ever let himself get picked on, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, right.
Eddie Deezen's with me on Revenge of the 80s Radio. You know him from several movies, as well as commercials and cartoon animated features. Eddie, you usually played a protagonist or whimsical type in movies. Let's go back to Menlo Schwartzer. How much fun was it to play the bad guy?
Oh, I loved it. Very much fun. Fred Olen Ray is one of the great comedy directors. He likes to do B movies, but I always thought he could have done A comedies, but he likes doing the B films. He's kind of a cult comedy director, but he's got a great comedy mind, so that was fun. We had Gary Graver was the cameraman, and he had worked with Orson Welles. He was Orson Welles' cameraman for years, and he would tell us all these great Orson Welles stories, so that was fun. Linda Carriage, and Surf 2 was just a very fun film. There was never a Surf 1, We were actually in the Guinness Book of World Records. There was no Surf 1. It was the first movie made where there was a 2 and no 1. And a lot of the reviews point out that was the best part of the film. They say there'll be no Surf 3, though, of course, after seeing Surf 2. Well, what did the critics know,
Well, it should have been Surf 4 anyway. That's how
You're
it
right.
works out, right? It was likely because of your recognizability and approach to a normally cardboard-type character that you were more in demand and eventually became a cult figure with I'll say, rabid following. There's an Eddie Deezen fan club. There are some social networking sites in tribute to you. What do you think of your place in movie history?
I would say I'll be kind of an asterisk character. I was never like a big star. But I never really got the credit for starting the nerd character. It's like, I think the first nerd, the history goes, Harold Lloyd was probably the first nerd in the silent films, and then he did it. Then, like I say, Charles Martin Smith started in American Graffiti, but nobody followed him. He just did the character and was left alone for like 5 years. And then when I started doing it, you'll see they started coming out of the woodwork. I kind of started like the nasal voice, the spastic kind of a nerd guy, and then you'll see movie after movie started that after me, and nobody ever really acknowledged that. I'm not bitter because I had such a wonderful career. I've had so much fun, but I did really start that character. If you look at that, I was the first one.
The Happy Days Eugene was kind of modeled after you a little bit, wasn't
Yeah, exactly. Stuff like that.
You were also in the small screen, interestingly enough, as well. You were part of the series Homeroom. You were a recurring character on Punky Brewster. You appeared on various TV shows.
I did a Magnum PI. We got to go to Hawaii, and I met Tom Selleck. He was just a wonderful, nice guy. Remember, he had us to his room. He cooked us spaghetti dinners himself. He's just a really, really nice guy.
What was your acting preference, more or less, in the 80s, TV or movies, and why?
Oh, I love doing movies because I'm not good at memorizing lines. TV, I've done 9 pilots in my life, and TV, unless you can memorize lines, it's very hard. They'll put, new lines under your door every day in your dressing room. You get rewrites under your door, and it's really hard. Whereas movies, you do 1 scene, maybe 2 scenes a day. It's very easy to just do the same scene over and over. You don't have to memorize a lot, and that always helped me, and I like doing films.
With me on Revenge of the 80s is actor Eddie Deezen. His Hollywood credits are numerous, and he was a staple of memorable movies from the 1980s. Straight ahead, we continue to talk about an interesting career and his move to becoming an in-demand voice talent. This is Chris with Eddie Deezen on Revenge of the 80s Radio.